It is a presentation regarding property assessments by Kathy Temchek, the Director of Real Estate Assessments.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome. Are you going to rely on technology?
Our computer's working yet, so
I thought we would, but, you know, good old paper.
I think we may be challenged by that, so. Since we're not using the technology, will these slides be available on the internet?
yes, we're going to put it up on the website tomorrow.
Okay. It's good to see you, Director. You've made my email light up and made me very popular recently.
All right. So thank you for having us here tonight to talk to you about assessments. So I thought tonight specifically, just very quickly going to go through some background about assessments, and then we'll get more into what exactly happened this year in Concord. So as a review, by statute, RSA 75-1, selectmen are supposed to appraise property every year at market value. There are a few exceptions to that, and those are in statute. So for example, that could be like current use, 79E, residential in a commercial industrial zone. There's numerous other ones, but those are just some of them. So historically, since 2004, as the market has changed, Concord has adjusted assessments to reflect what has been happening in the marketplace. So every year we review, analyze, and update our property assessments to reflect what's been happening in the market. We don't set the market, we analyze the market. We set values based on what's happening in the market. So this past year for April 1, 2021, we reviewed 15 months of sales. 15 months of sales in order to analyze and determine assessments for all properties as of April 1st. So this review includes, we look at deeds, we research deeds, we review MLS listings, we review other online listings, we review our property record card to try to make sure if our information is correct. We have conversations with property owners, real estate brokers, and we also try to visit properties that have sold. So how do we actually determine the value? Well, we try to inspect those sold properties. As I said, we research and analyze these sales. We request rents, expenses, and interest rates for commercial industrial properties. And then we analyze this. And we basically set a model that tries to look at all the different components of the assessment, set a model that is then used based on what we find in sales. We then apply that same model to all the properties in the city that haven't sold. So for example, if we're trying to make adjustments to a certain type of property like capes or ranches, whatever we find in our model for sales, we make those same adjustments to the whole file so that all capes and ranches get adjusted. So you might ask, how do we get this information? Again, we mail income and expense forms to commercial industrial property owners. We get real estate income and expenses. We're not looking at business income and expenses. Any information that we get from property owners like this is kept confidential. We look at recent appraisals that we've received from either sales or appeals. We look at rental listings, sale advertisements, and again, we try to visit properties and conversations with property owners and tenants. Where do we get information about sales? The main information piece that we get it from are from deeds. We send out some questionnaire responses. There are some types of property, manufactured homes, The first time that they sell, there's no requirement that a deed be recorded, so we try to reach out to those people to find out what exactly they paid for their home. We look at fee appraisals. The state of New Hampshire, if you're buying and selling property, requires that you fill out a New Hampshire PA 34 form. It's supposed to be submitted to the Department of Revenue and to us. And so we look at that information. Again, we do property inspections, conversations with brokers, realtors, and conversations with property owners. So as you can see, it's quite a broad source of information that we're looking at and broad spectrum of people that we're talking to when we're trying to set values. So what would cause your property value to change? So there could be physical changes or corrections to the land and buildings based on inspections, based on surveys, based on information that we need to correct. There could be changes in zoning that might affect your value. There could be land use approvals for subdivision, zoning changes within an area that could affect your value. Subdivisions, and then obviously changes in the marketplace and neighborhood changes. So something, if we had a neighborhood that was maybe not as desirable, but maybe something happened in that neighborhood to make it more desirable, then the values could be going up based on those changes. There are requirements by statute that we need to keep our values at. So again, we talked about a property being assessed at market value. There is a range. So if you think about, we're setting a model, we're doing a mass appraisal. We're not doing a fee appraisal on every piece of property. So we're doing a model that's going to value all the properties. We're required to have each strata or group has to be appraised within 5% of the overall level. So for example, I said if the property is assessed overall, our values are at 95%, then everything, every kind of strata, condos, capes, South End, Pennacook, all has to be assessed within 5% either direction of that number. So this is just a real simplified version of what we do with sales. But basically, if these were sales that we had in our community, and you see our goal is try to be at 100. We're never always going to have everything at 100. But let's say we had sales and they were like a little more than 100, one's at 110, and then we had some other ones that were down here like closer to 95, 80%. So there's a pretty big range between those, the 80-something and the 110, which would not be acceptable. So we need to make adjustments to property values to get them closer. And so that's what we do, is we make these models, determine what adjustments need to be made to make the assessments closer. So if this was in color, if we could stick it up there on the, you'd be able to see the different colors and how they move. But basically, we're taking the ones that we looked at first, we make adjustments and we move them closer to that one. There could be properties that really don't need adjustments. So those would be ones that are already sort of clustered around one. They may not require any adjustments, or they require less adjustments than other property types. So now, specifically, we're going to talk about what's been happening here in Concord. So, commercial industrial properties, even though property values for commercial and industrial have been going up in total, they're not rising at the same level as residential properties. So if we're not seeing double-digit increases in overall value in commercial industrial property. We have been seeing that for the last couple years, though, in residential properties in many areas. It's doubling, triple, double, 10% or more of residential. So obviously, we're not going to be keeping up. Commercial is not going to be increasing at the same rate. Even though they're going up, they're not going up double digits. So basically, over the last 18 months, despite the impacts of COVID, the vacancy rates for commercial industrial properties, including warehouses, have remained fairly low. The rents have been stable on those types of properties over the last 18 months. And CoStar talked about that there was probably the fewest retail closings in 2021 than there had been in the last 7 years in the area. So that part's good. The fact that there's not, large vacancies, that we're seeing, stable rents, those are good things for the value. But those are not things like we talked about that are going to be creating the values to go up if things are remaining somewhat stable. So the office market, vacancy rates still remained low for April 1. Rents have been somewhat stable, although they've started to decline slightly. So that's something we're going to need to be able to keep an eye on, what's happening with our office rents. And it's possible that for 2022, depending on what happens between now and next spring, there might need to be reductions actually in those types of properties, but we'll have to wait and see. So, got stability. There could be a slight slippage somewhere in the office values, but then what's happening with residential? That has not been the trend with residential property values. And since April 2020, which was the last year that we did a revaluation, a year ago, there's been a continued high demand for residential property. There are fewer properties available for sale. And so supply and demand is one of the things that affects value. That's, basic economic forces, right? And then we have these historic low interest rates on top of that. And so that has sort of created this perfect storm of values for residential properties going up a lot. And so even though to the point where back in April, we were the second hottest housing market in the United States, with only Manchester and Nashua ahead of us as of April 1st. For October, I think we were still number 8. We dropped down to 8, but we were still within the top 10. So these are some little graphs to just give you some ideas about where we were at and what we were looking at for median sale prices. So for median sale prices in 2019 for Merrimack County, we were at, for year to date, $251,500 for April 2019. By the time we got to April 20, so a year later, we were at $284,000. And then for April 2021, we were at $366,500 as the median sale price for a single-family home in Merrimack County. That is a huge increase. There's no doubt about it. And you can see what we talked about the number of properties being the closed sales, how they're going down, the days on the market going down. All things saying this market is very dynamic and that it's going very quickly. So next graph talks about condos, the same type of thing. Huge increases on those. So not as high in our value. We have a lot of smaller condos. So for Merrimack, at least us here in Merrimack County, seems as well. But for April 1, 2019, we were at 191, and by the time we get to 2021, we're at 235,000. That's still a big increase. And so putting all that into some charts, then if you look at the grid over here, you can see the number of inventory for homes for sale going down. So back in June of 2019, we have 5,491 homes for sale in Merrimack County. By the time we get down to June of 2021, we're down to 1,905. So there's not much inventory. And that same little red in the darker color there are the condos. So 964 in June of 2019, 384 properties in June of 2021. So what does that mean in month supplies? So we basically went from 3.7 months supply down to 1.2. For condos, we're down to 0.8 months. And again, just a little chart there that shows you what's been happening over time. We talked about the interest rates going down. So you have a chart here that shows where the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate is. So just if you look under April 2019 under Freddie Mac for 30-year mortgage was at 4.16%. June 2021, 30-year fixed mortgage under Freddie Mac, 2.98%. So over a percentage point less. That's, again, a huge difference. So what's sort of been happening? What does happen with the market? And what's been happening with our assessments? So again, we analyze what's happening. We adjust the assessments to reflect what's happening in the marketplace. So you can see since 2004 where we've been with our assessments. So this would be the average assessment. We started out in 2004, we were at 2019, 812. We saw increases up till the time we got to 2009, and then the market dipped. So then we went down, and in 2012, 2013, we started to go back up. And so now we've been on a trajectory upwards since that time. Now we're going to talk about value distribution. We talked a little bit earlier about how we've seen this double-digit increases in residential. We're not seeing those same kind of increases with commercial industrial properties. So between 2018 and 2021, you can see what's been happening with our total assessed value. And if you look at the bottom color, so starting at 18 and going up, that first line there is residential. And then the next lighter line would be commercial industrial, and then at the one at the top are utilities. So you can see, just looking at this, that the residential is getting more higher up the grid. Actually, the utilities have been getting higher. And I want you to think about, we see all this construction happening in the roads with Liberty Utilities. We see, works in our roads, things happening with poles. That's all things that are contributing to value. So those things are improvements for us that are good for our value and good for our community. So if we look at this total, and I try to think, how can I sort of explain this that would make sense? So where I have that percentage of total value, if you were to think that that was $1, so $1, so in 18, residential properties were 57.7 cents of that dollar. Commercial industrial was 37.5 cents, and then utilities were 4.8. So you can see between 18 and 21 how residential properties have been taking up more of the dollar. So by the time we get to 2021, now our residential properties are 61.9 cents, commercial is 32.9, and utilities are 5.2. So they're making up a bigger portion of our value, right? When we can look at it that way. So what's been happening with the budget? So between 18 and the 18 budget and the 2022, you can see the increases, and this is just the city budget. This is not any of the other portions of the budget, the county, the schools, or the state education. This is just the city portion of the budget. The increases that were made over the years, and then the average of those years is 2.31%. That's what's happened with the budget at the same time that our values have been going up. So again, when you look at this change of that, so for the average, that average of 2.31% over time, you can see that the commercials are picking up a portion of those increases.
Residential. The residential.
I'm sorry, the residentials are picking
yeah.
up a bigger
Okay.
portion of those increases. So a lot of times, and I don't know if you've gotten this question, but a lot of times we get phone calls from people and they say, well, what are you doing with all this extra money you're getting from me? You know, the city's making all this extra money because my taxes went up. So what we have to explain to them that the process happens is that budgets get adopted by the city, the Merrimack County, the school districts, prior to any setting of the tax rate. So exactly how we calculate the tax rate is we take the amount needed to fund all those budgets, we subtract other revenue sources, and then we sum those totals together, those four portions, again, the city, the county, the schools, and the state education, to get the total dollars needed to fund those budgets that have been approved by those different bodies. Subtract the money, other revenues, so like that could be for us, voter vehicle registration, permit fees be subtracted, would be some example of that. That remaining number is the amount to be raised by property taxes to fund those budgets. The tax rate is calculated by dividing the total taxable assessments to be raised, that we just talked about, into the amount to be raised. There's no additional monies collected over the amount that's needed to actually fund those budgets. So there's no windfall, there's no, we have all this extra money coming in because somebody's tax bill went up. So what does happen is people's values change. We are an ad valorem state, property values at market value. So basically, the tax burden gets redistributed amongst the properties based upon their value. So generally speaking, properties with the largest percentage increases are going to be taking on more of the tax burden. Properties with the smaller or smallest increases may not take on any additional tax burden, or they may take on less, depending on what exactly happened with their values. Not to say that their values went down, but if the percentage of change was small, it could be that they're actually paying less. And properties that obviously saw no increase in their valuation would actually see a reduction in their tax bill. Again, changes in the tax burden are dependent on the market value and the percentage of change when compared to other properties within the community. That's sort of the big picture for values and what's happened. I just want to quickly go over, there are tax relief forms for property owners. So there's a number of state laws that can either reduce or postpone property taxes. Most of those programs are relief programs targeted to certain categories of taxpayers. So for example, the elderly, the blind, low income. Each one has its own rules, each requirements, and so you can apply for that. If you have questions about that, you can go online. All of those things are listed on our website, or you can call us and we'd be happy to talk to you about them. There is a deadline for those relief programs, and that deadline is April 15th, so it's too late for tax year 2021. But if you think you were to qualify for April 1, 2022, the deadline to apply is April 15th. Those are fatal deadlines. There's no wiggle room past that. The deadline is the deadline. There's also tax credits. So there's the veterans tax credit, the all veterans tax, the surviving spouse is somebody who was killed in active duty, and service-connected total disability. Again, the deadline is April 15th, 2022 for 2022 taxes. And then there's another program, which is the elderly and disabled tax deferral, and that's sort of misnomer, it's elderly or disabled tax deferral program. You don't have to be both. And that deadline is March 1st of 2022, and that is for the 2021 tax year. And again, the last thing is property owners can appeal their assessment. So if you feel that the assessment does not reflect market value, then you have an opportunity to appeal. And that appeal is your opportunity to demonstrate that the assessment is unfair, incorrect, or not representative of market value. You have until March 1, 2022 to do that. And the fact that somebody's taxes went up is not a reason for appeal. And that's not going to get you a reduction of your assessment if you just say, I'm appealing because my taxes went up. Because the taxes is a function of the budgets that have been approved and the assessed value. It's a mathematical calculation which cannot be, that part of it can't be appealed. So if you want to contact our office, we have the telephone number there. We're open Monday through Friday. We have our website. There's a database where you can go online. We'll have this presentation up starting tomorrow. We have several other presentations that talked about the increase, and I don't know if you went online to see it, that specifically showed several properties in the city with basically no changes and how much they've increased in a short period of time. So I'm available to take questions.
Councilor Sakos.
Thank you. This is a really informative presentation. I appreciate all the time you put into it. I had one question about the New Hampshire Inventory of Homes. I was just curious, do we have a sense whether or not that inventory is less because people are staying put because of COVID, or if it's urban flight and people moving and relocating to our city? Just trying to get a sense of how long we think that this
I
might.
have hearing issues, so I'm
Oh,
going to
yeah.
need you to speak
I'll speak a
really
little louder.
loud for me.
Thank you. Sorry, this is a new mask for me too. I'm not used to it. So I was curious if we know with the New Hampshire Inventory of Homes, whether or not this is expected to be short-term because people are not selling homes that they may have in the past because they're staying put more because of COVID, or if we think it's more because of urban flight and people relocating to our community, if we have a sense of that.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is what's happening something because people aren't selling their homes, or is this something we're desirable as a city and people wanting to move here? Is that basically the question?
Essentially, yeah.
I'd say it's probably some of both. I'd say that we are a desirable city in many aspects, and so people would want to move here. You know, we have a lot of things to offer people, and so I think that's happening. But I just think it's a matter of, they've talked about for years, there was, a certain generation of people that weren't buying homes. I think that started to change, and so there's a demand for homes. But it's all about supply and demand, and where we don't have a supply, the demand is high, then the values are going to be high. Now, what's going to happen in the future? If I knew that, I'd be making lots of money somewhere else. And if I had a crystal ball and I could tell everybody what was going to happen, I don't know. And so we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Thank you.
Councilor Chaplin.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I want to add my thanks to you for this very thorough and informative report. I have two questions. One is, it sounds to me like what you're saying is that to a certain extent we've been a victim of our own success relative to the increased value of residential properties, but we've been a victim of COVID to a certain extent in terms of the decline, the declining value of commercial and industrial properties. Is that kind of a fair statement?
So is the question is that you think that the values aren't going up with commercial industrial properties because of COVID,
Yeah.
basically?
Because of the changes we've seen, both so the business impact of COVID and the movement of more workplaces to be, more workplaces to have people working from home.
I don't know that we know enough really yet to see if long-term what the effects of COVID are going to be with the commercial industrial properties. I don't think we know enough yet. And I think that's one of the things that when I talked about the office buildings starting to maybe show a little bit of slippage on that, we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Okay, thank you. Second follow-up, Your Honor. The second question is, I may have missed this, but I heard you say that the fact that a person's property taxes increased is not grounds for an appeal. But what is grounds for an appeal? What would be a valid grounds for appeal?
So grounds for appeal would be that you don't believe that we have the market value correct. So that could be that you might have had a recent appraisal that chances are it probably doesn't match our assessment, they rarely ever do, but that there could be a reason why the assessment's wrong. Maybe we've not inspected the property for quite some time, and so we might have outdated information. And so it's important that if you look at your card, and we recommend that people certainly look at their assessment card to make sure that the information that we have is accurate. And then if for some reason, and we make errors because we're human, and so we're out there putting things in by hand, we're putting things in the computer by hand, it could be that we miscalculated something, and when you go through your information, we might have 3 bathrooms when in fact you only have 2. So that would be an example of something. You want to make sure that that information is correct, or we have a finished basement and you really don't have a finished basement, for example. The other thing would be if you look at your neighbors and they all seem to be like their land value, and might be like, say, around 100,000, but all of a sudden yours is like at 130. Okay, is there a reason for that? Or again, is there something that's causing yours to be different when it really shouldn't be? And so that would be a reason why you'd want to appeal.
Great, thanks for that answer. Thank you, Your Honor.
Elskich.
Thank you. Excuse me. Kathy, in terms of the commercial property assessments, what percentage responds with the income expense report?
We're getting fewer and fewer every year, just like we are with people allowing this in for inspection. So I'd be surprised if we're getting like 20% of
And how
what
is
we
that
send out.
verified?
We used to, at one point in time, we got over 40%.
Okay, my second question is in terms of appeals, how many actually are successful, approximately?
It varies.
I'm not going to hold you to the number, but 5%?
Yeah, I think it varies on the year, and then also, what is your idea of successful? Is it going down $100, or is it going down like 50%?
My
You know
definition
what I
of
mean?
successful is in favor of the homeowner or the taxpayer.
Well, actually, success would be no change.
Right, that would,
Not
yeah,
if you're
for the
making,
city, that would be right,
not
that
if you're
would be
making an appeal.
success.
I would not consider it success.
Uh,
But approximately.
Yeah, it's
I think
different from year to year.
It really does depend on the year. I mean, I've seen some years where the commercial side has come in and challenged everything. We have some not homeowners, but some large property owners who challenge everything. And, I mean, my recollection is the city, your office has been rather successful over the years.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think you can measure, I mean, we put money in the budget for abatements, and we've never been too far off, you know, what we put in there. We've never really had to come back.
Yeah, no, the reason for my question really is rhetorical. If people make an appeal, I mean, do they have a chance of succeeding, I guess is probably my question.
If it's warranted, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would echo Sue. If there's a reason for the value to be lower, then it would be lowered. If there isn't, then it's not going to be. But I can't tell you that until you file the appeal or we look at the appeal.
No, that's a fair answer, thank you.
I'm gonna recognize Council Pierce, but before I do, when you're measuring comps, when you say, hey, my assessment's too high, and you're measuring comps, and you live in Councilor Rice Hawkins's ward, you're probably not gonna be comparing yourself to Councilor Pierce's ward, correct? You generally stay within those neighborhoods, right?
Right.
So when people look at their particular situation, you may live in East Concord, you don't necessarily want to compare yourself to the south end. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, so, yeah, that's basically what we would tell people to look at, you know, go up and down your street. Look at properties that you think look like yours or about the same age as yours. Is there a big difference? And there's always going to be a difference in that every property is never exactly like another one. It's never the exact size. It's never, you know, the same inside. But just, you know, when you look at something, does it look like yours and is there a huge difference? We have people come in and they talk to us about that, and we might be able to look at it and say, well, yeah, there's a big difference because in yours you've got updates and you've done improvements where your neighbor hasn't, or it could be vice versa.
Council Pierce.
Thank you. You partially answered my question with Councilor Champlin's question, but I've had a few questions from my constituents regarding the value of their land as opposed to their home, where their taxes went up, the rate went down, but they said, I don't understand the amount of the assessment of my property doubled, and I've made no improvements to it. How does that fit into the overall assessment of the total property, land and building? Do you have a formula for that, or just comps and, like you said, it's measured and the size of the lots?
Well, location, size of lots, but if you're dealing with a house site, so property that has one house on it in a particular area, those values probably for land amongst those property owners would be pretty consistent. Maybe a few $1,000s difference based on size, but it would be somewhat consistent in that respect. The land values, land values have become very high.
They're not making
So,
anymore.
You know, I think it is mind-boggling sometimes when you look at things that have happened over time and what the increases have been. And, you know, some days it's mind-boggling for us, and so I can certainly imagine for a property owner, it's that same type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Council Knight.
Thank you, Ms. Temchak. I can't thank you enough for presenting what is a very complicated topic in very easily digestible terms. I wish we could have had the presentation so you could have walked the public through it, but as you said, it'll be available tomorrow. So thank you very much. In short, my question would be, if a particular residential homeowner has a question about their valuation, or if he or she should submit an appeal, do you recommend that they call your office first and have a discussion with you or your staff? Or should they just go to the website and submit the appeal? What would be best for you and your staff and the homeowner?
I think it may be coming in and looking at information, because if they've not looked at sales and specifically, they may want to look at sales, because they may not be aware of what's been happening in the, you know, in their neighborhood and what properties are selling for. And so we have those sales books at the counter, they're in the library. So I would say I would start there, and then if you had questions, obviously, we're there every day to try to answer questions for people and help them.
Well, thank you very much.
Anyone else have questions? I just had one comment and one question. My comment's this. I want to publicly thank both of you, Director Temchek, Assistant Director Golden. I have been contacted by many, many constituents, as you can imagine. I have referred them all to your office after I failed to usually answer their questions. And I want to thank you for treating each one of them with respect, with the thoughtfulness, to walk them through, because this is not easy to understand for any one of us. And I've read the emails and your responses to them. They are thorough, they're well done, and I just want to make sure I publicly say thank you to both of you, as well as the rest of your staff. It is greatly appreciated for something that I know this much about, and it's hard for me to explain that much. The time you take with them makes a very big difference in how the city treats its citizens, so thank you. That's number one. The number two is, I appreciate all these slides, but it feels like this slide here, if I was to pick one, it summarizes everything that's going on. It feels like the one summary of this whole issue is simply the shift that is going on between the commercial to residential side. We know that the property values are, I know that I can sell my house for way more than I could ever imagine, probably. And we could all, might be able to experience that.
Then where do we live?
That's the point. I got no place to go.
Right, exactly.
But, I mean, I understand that. I also know that this group around here is a very responsible group of individuals in dealing with the budget. We put a lot of time in. We make sure that we are thoughtful in protecting the citizens of Concord, that we don't tax them out of their homes and such. I think we have been, to pat ourselves on the back, very, very prudent and fiscally responsible when it comes to budgeting. So given the fact that we're not increasing the budget a whole lot, why am I getting such a large increase in my taxes? And I think when I talk to them and I say, because the commercial side is paying less, somebody else is going to pick that up. And that's the summary that I think is really, everyone focuses on, I'm paying more, I'm paying more, I'm paying more. But the other side of that coin is, there are people who are paying less.
Right, well, and that's what I said in that other one too. Depending on the percentage, there were some people that paid less or maybe paid about the same.
Right. So
But at the end of the day,
Again,
we still
there are
have to only
people
bring in the
paying-
amount that's been approved by budget.
it's fair to say, there are people paying less, other people are paying more, because we are seeing a shift from the commercial side to the residential side. Is fair summary?
Yes,
Anybody else?
And just when the school makes up part of the tax rate as well, so even though the
I try
city-
not to talk about them. But thank you, you're right. Anyone else?
Yeah, that'll be the next presentation in the 200 series, so.
Thank you again, and thank you for how you treat the citizens of Concord.
Thank you for
Appreciate it.
your
thank
kind
you.
comments.
Thank you for having us.